You're standing in the bathroom, first thing in the morning, and you notice it. That ring of softness around your waist wasn't there 5 years ago. You haven't changed what you eat, you haven't stopped moving, but something shifted, and no matter what you try, it stays. More cardio, fewer carbs, better sleep, nothing works. So you look it up and get one simple answer: cortisol, the stress hormone. Lower your stress, lose the belly. Except the science says something the wellness influencers leave out. That fat around your midsection isn't just a consequence of high cortisol. It is actively producing cortisol, manufacturing it right there inside fat cells, and feeding it back into your bloodstream. You don't just have a stress problem, you have a loop. Once that loop locks in, calming down isn't enough to break it. If you're new here, welcome to Yellowhead Science. We break down real health and lifestyle science in a way that makes sense. Join us, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a video. Here's the standard cortisol story you've heard 1,000 times. You get stressed. Your brain activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. That's the communication chain between your brain and your adrenal glands. Essentially, your body's emergency broadcast system. Your adrenal glands pump out cortisol, raising your blood sugar. It sharpens your focus and shifts your body into survival mode. And that's supposed to be temporary. Cortisol spikes, you deal with the threat, cortisol comes back down. But when stress becomes chronic, the job, the bills, the broken sleep, the constant low-grade pressure that never fully goes away keeps cortisol elevated. And here's where the internet stops. Chronic cortisol leads to belly fat. End of story. Meditate, take ashwagandha, do yoga, problem solved. But that's only half the mechanism. And if you only fix half a loop, the loop keeps running. Here's the part nobody explains. Your visceral fat contains an enzyme that converts cortisone into active cortisol. We'll call it the cortisol converter enzyme. This enzyme works right there inside the fat tissue. So the fat isn't just storing energy, it's running a local cortisol factory. And the more visceral fat you carry, the more enzyme and cortisol you produce. This happens independent of how stressed you actually feel. Someone can meditate every morning, sleep 8 hours, feel genuinely calm, and still carry that ring of abdominal fat. Because the cortisol driving fat storage isn't coming from their brain anymore. It's coming from the fat itself. The tissue is self-reinforcing. And it gets worse. Cortisol doesn't work alone. It needs a partner, insulin. In the presence of insulin, which rises after meals, cortisol activates fat enzyme. This enzyme pulls fatty acids out of your blood into visceral fat cells. Without insulin, cortisol alone doesn't drive storage nearly as hard. But with insulin, the combination is a fat storage accelerator, aimed directly at your midsection. Now here's why this matters more as you get older. Your body has a natural cortisol rhythm. It peaks in the morning, about 30 minutes after you wake up, and drops gradually through the day, reaching its lowest point in the evening. This rhythm is supposed to keep cortisol's effects time-limited. But research shows older adults experience what scientists call phase advancement. The entire cortisol curve shifts earlier. In older men, the cortisol peak arrives about 3 hours ahead of schedule, and the evening decline doesn't drop as low as it used to. A study on sleep deprivation found older adults had significantly increased afternoon cortisol, while younger adults showed no change at all in that same window. The aging body responds to stress with a bigger, longer cortisol hit. And there's a second factor working against you. Growth hormone, which promotes fat breakdown, declines steadily from your 30s. So the ratio shifts, less growth hormone pushing fat out of storage. More cortisol pushing fat into storage, the balance tips. The midsection pays the price. And there's a third piece. Chronic cortisol exposure wears down the sensitivity of your glucocorticoid receptors. These are the docking stations on your cells that cortisol binds to. Think of it like insulin resistance, but for cortisol. Your body produces more cortisol, but the receptors stop listening. So the anti-inflammatory effects of cortisol fade. But the fat storage effects, working through a different pathway, keep going. You end up with the worst of both worlds. rising inflammation and rising fat storage at the same time. This concept is called glucocorticoid resistance. It breaks the normal link between cortisol and immune regulation in chronic stress. In other words, the cortisol is there, but it stopped doing protective work while driving fat into your midsection. This isn't a willpower failure, it's a hormonal shift that changes the rules of the game. Now, before we go further, I need to be honest about something. You've probably seen the viral trend: cortisol face, cortisol belly, 30-day resets. These promise visible results from stress reduction alone. The research doesn't support that. Scientists have rebranded diet culture as wellness. You cannot spot reduce fat from your midsection by lowering cortisol. There is no 30-day cortisol reset that will reshape your body. And here's a finding that might surprise you. Roughly half of people with obesity had elevated cortisol levels, but the other half had completely normal levels. Cortisol is real, but it's not the whole story for everyone. Genetics, insulin sensitivity, diet, estrogen, and physiology all play roles. So if anyone tells you there's one hormone to fix and one supplement to take, they're selling you a shortcut that doesn't exist. What we can do is understand the loop and interrupt it at multiple points. Breaking the cortisol fat loop requires hitting it from more than one angle. Here's what the evidence actually supports: specific interventions. Interventions that target the mechanisms we just covered. First, protect the evening cortisol decline. Sleep restriction below 5.5 hours raises afternoon cortisol. That elevated evening cortisol disrupts the recovery window your body needs. This is specifically about protecting the downslope of your cortisol curve. Aim for 7 to 8 hours, but non-negotiable is the last 2 hours. Keep the last 2 hours before bed low stimulation. No intense exercise, stressful content, or bright screens flooding your eyes. Second, use moderate intensity exercise strategically. Exercise below 40% of maximum effort actually lowers circulating cortisol. Above 60%, cortisol rises. The sweet spot is moderate movement: brisk walk, steady bike ride, swimming. Keep it under 60 minutes. Here's the critical detail. Vigorous exercise dampens your cortisol stress response. People exercising at 70% intensity showed lower cortisol and faster recovery when they faced stress afterward. But overtraining without recovery does the opposite. It chronically elevates cortisol. So the protocol isn't exercise harder, it's exercise smart, then recover. Third, address the insulin side of the equation. Remember, cortisol needs insulin to activate the fat storage pathway. Every time you spike insulin, especially in the evening, cortisol gets a co-pilot. This doesn't mean eliminating carbohydrates. It means being strategic about timing. Front-load your carbohydrates earlier in the day when cortisol is naturally high. Insulin sensitivity is better in the morning. Reduce simple sugars and refined carbs in the evening meal. Fourth, the 5-minute breathing reset. Mindfulness and deep breathing produced the strongest cortisol-lowering effects of any intervention. Stronger than therapy, stronger than general mind-body practices. Just 5 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing produced measurable cortisol reductions. Slow, deep belly breaths. The mechanism works through the parasympathetic nervous system. It directly counteracts fight or flight activation that keeps cortisol elevated. 5 minutes is not a lifestyle overhaul. It's one parking lot intervention. You can do it before you walk into work. Fifth, spend 20 minutes outside. This sounds almost too simple, but a controlled study found that 20 minutes in a natural setting, a park, a trail, even a garden, significantly lowered cortisol levels compared to the same amount of time spent in an urban environment. The mechanism works through the parasympathetic nervous system, the same pathway that deep breathing activates. Nature exposure doesn't require athletic ability, equipment, or a gym membership. It's the lowest barrier cortisol intervention that actually has evidence behind it. Sixth, for those considering supplementation, the best studied option is ashwagandha root extract. A 60-day randomized controlled trial using 600 milligrams daily showed a 28% reduction in serum cortisol compared to placebo. But here's the context most supplement ads won't give you. The effect takes 6 to 8 weeks to appear. It works best alongside the lifestyle factors above, and it's not a replacement for addressing the root causes of chronic stress. The cortisol-fat connection is real. But it's not the simple, one-directional story the internet wants to sell you. It's a loop. Stress drives cortisol. Cortisol drives fat storage. Fat produces more cortisol, and the whole system tightens with age as your hormonal balance shifts. You can't break that loop with a supplement alone. You can't meditate it away. But you can interrupt it. At the sleep window, at the exercise threshold, at the insulin gate, at the breathing reset. Hit it at enough points, consistently, and the loop starts to loosen. That's not a 30-day transformation. That's how your body actually works. If this changed how you think about cortisol, leave a comment and tell me, what's the one thing you've been doing to manage stress that might actually be making the loop worse? I love reading every single one. And if you want more science-backed health lifestyle strategies designed for someone just like you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next video.